To some, it represents an opportunity to propel Toronto to the forefront of an emerging field within the technology ecosystem, solidifying its place as a world leader of smart city innovation for generations to come. From weather-responsive, heated pavement to underground tunnels and smart containers, it's hard to argue against the fact that many of the proposed innovations are just plain cool. But to others, it represents a significant overreach of corporate power, a city surrendering control to a global surveillance juggernaut in order to create a space where unprecedented quantities of citizen data will be collected and harvested for mostly private gain. From the wide use of sensors that can monitor the movements of individuals to the sale of public space to a private, for-profit corporation, it's also hard to argue against the fact that many of the proposed innovations are just plain scary. My name is Jared Linzen. I'm a freelance journalist based in Toronto, and I'd like to thank you all for participating in the latest chapter of a debate that's gripped the City of Toronto for over 2 years. The road to this debate, however, was paved long before Google established a parent company called Alphabet, and long before Alphabet launched its urban innovation firm, Sidewalk Labs. In 2001, all three branches of Toronto's government came together to create an organization dedicated to improving the city's waterfront, creatively naming that organization Waterfront Toronto. Among its many projects was a $1.25 billion taxpayer-funded flood protection project along the city's portlands in 2016. Around that time, Waterfront Toronto also began looking for a partner to help develop the land into a space that could address some of the city's greatest urban challenges. After a brief selection process, the mayor, premier, and prime minister announced their decision to move forward with the project in October of 2017, selecting Sidewalk Labs as its innovation partner. Soon after the project was announced and the initial plans were released, heavy on aspiration, but short on detail, the proposal kicked off a wave of resignations from high-profile citizens affiliated with the project. Real estate developer Julie DiLorenzo resigned her position on the board of Waterfront Toronto. Tech Girls Canada founder Sadia Muzaffar resigned from her role on Waterfront Toronto's digital strategy advisory panel. And the province's former privacy commissioner, Anne Kavoukian, resigned her consulting role with Sidewalk Labs in October of last year. In her letter of resignation, Anne wrote, "I imagine us creating a smart city of privacy as opposed to a smart city of surveillance." We're very fortunate to have Anne here with us today. Despite the opposition, a February 2019 survey commissioned by the Toronto Regional Board of Trade found that 55% of citizens supported the Sidewalk Labs project and only 11% opposed it. Soon after the poll was released, the Vice President of Public Affairs for the Toronto Regional Board of Trade, Brian Kelsey, told the parliamentary committee that, quote, "We believe that tearing up this process midstream poses reputational risks, trade risks, and legal risks." We're fortunate to have Brian here with us today as well. To combat mounting criticism, Sidewalk Labs also mobilized support from some of the highest profile members of the city's technology community, inviting them to participate in, among other things, a video series promoting the project this past summer. In one such video, the managing director of Techstars Toronto, Sunil Sharma, argued that Sidewalk Labs will, quote, "elevate the stature of Toronto amongst urbanists, city planners, entrepreneurs, and innovators across the world." Sunil, thank you for being with us today. Also this summer, the international community started to take greater notice, and the debate expanded well beyond the city and even the country's borders. One very intelligent and wildly popular Toronto-based freelance journalist was commissioned to write a feature on the Sidewalk Labs project for a New York-based business magazine, Fast Company. That was me. His flawless journalistic masterpiece that was published in early September included commentary from a range of experts on all sides of the debate, including the president of Ontario-based cyber firm Identos, Mike Cook. In the article, Mike argued, quote, "We can't give away our data city by city for some free tech." Mike, thank you for being with us here today as well. There's a lot of questions that have yet to be answered, but the one we know for sure is that the now 2-year-long debate isn't just about Toronto or about Sidewalk Labs. What happens here in our city will set a precedent for all smart city projects to come. And while the opportunities are clearly significant, so too are the potential risks. The debate has brought up issues of data collection and privacy in an increasingly interconnected world, about the dedication of public spaces for private gain, of adapting modern solutions to address civic challenges, and of reimagining what a city can and should be, with Toronto's reputation as a growing technology powerhouse hanging in the balance. I want to thank you all for participating in this conversation today and look forward to discussing a wide range of issues over the coming hour. The motion for the debate is Sidewalk Labs' proposed development in Toronto is a net gain for the city. Now, before we get started, I wanted to outline the format of this debate, which will be conducted using the Oxford style. As such, we will be taking 2 polls of the audience, one at the start of the debate and one at the end. The winner will ultimately be chosen not based on who gets the most votes, but who gains the most votes over that 1 hour long debate. In other words, who is able to change the most minds. At this point in time, I'd like to ask you in the audience to open up your phones and go to slido.com and submit your initial vote. The code is TMLS2019. No hashtag. As far as the debate's format, each team of 2 will be given 7 minutes to present their opening statement. We flipped a coin earlier, and the pro side will be presenting first. After opening statements, I will ask each team a question, which they will have 2.5 minutes to answer, and their opponents will have 2.5 minutes to rebut. After I've asked all the questions I can in the allotted time, each team will have 3 minutes to present their closing arguments. We ask that only one representative from each team speaks at one time throughout the duration of this debate. Now, before we go any further, I just want to see where we are in this poll. I'll give you guys a few more seconds before we conclude the initial poll. Still moving. All right, I think we're steady. All right. So on the agree side, we have 74% and disagree 26%. And that will be our opening marker for this debate. So with that, I'd like to invite Sunil and Brian to present their opening statements arguing for the motion. Your 7 minutes begins now.
Toronto has become one of the most talked about tech cities in the world. In many ways, it came upon us by surprise. A confluence of developments, events, and opportunities, several of which were completely outside of our own control. My name is Sunil Sharma. I'm the Managing Director of Techstars Toronto. Techstars is the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. We are based in the USA, and we operate a global network of 50 technology accelerators across more than 20 countries. We are completely privately funded, and we've made more than 2,000 startup investments to date, growing by about 500 per year. We operate 2 accelerators here in Toronto, one being exclusively focused on prop tech, which of course includes smart city innovation. I'm also the co-host of the Collision Conference, which just last summer brought more than 27,000 people, entrepreneurs mainly, from across the globe to Toronto, for what was easily the largest gathering of tech people ever in this country. The conference is owned by an Ireland-based company called Web Summit, and they saw a massive turnout of investors, corporations, startups, entrepreneurs, and media. Essentially, talent came to the city, and it greatly exceeded even their own expectations. In June, we will do it again, and we will raise the bar once more. So the question should be why? Well, our city's talent pool is outpacing all North American cities, and we are home to more than 4,000 startups. Our startups are capturing the attention of global venture capital investors across Canada and across the world. We're home to world-class universities and colleges. We have an abundance of government programs that support innovation through world-class research and a network of incubators and accelerators. We're also attracting international private accelerators, including Techstars, but more recently Acceleprise and Generator, and global investment banks like Silicon Valley Bank. WeWork, while in the news today for some exuberance of their own, has discovered that Toronto is one of its fastest growing launch markets ever, which is a testament to the sheer number of entrepreneurs living here wishing to do great things. Now, our city's innovativeness is underpinned by one more unique factor: immigration. No city in the world has become home to more immigrants, and a walk down the hallways of any engineering, computer science, or business faculty at any of our universities or colleges will be testament to that. And just to look around this room today is proof to that point. Immigrants are entrepreneurial, and immigrants are disruptors. Immigrants who aspire to be entrepreneurs are attracted by opportunities and are receptive and influenced by signals. So let's turn to one such signal, Sidewalk Labs, and what it means for Toronto. Our view is that thanks to Sidewalk Labs, Quayside can become a global hub for urban innovation, a place that fosters new ideas for improving quality of life in cities, whether in Canada or around the world. It's an opportunity for piloting innovation and a positive continued signal of what brands our city internationally. Sidewalk, as proposed, should be an opportunity for ecosystem development, including strengthening access to capital and talent and providing access to sophisticated buyers and customers worldwide. Now, I've noticed that Sidewalk Labs has made several significant policy statements very recently as part of their digital charter. I'm going to touch upon some of them. First, a new venture capital fund. Sidewalk plans to establish a venture fund focusing on Canadian companies. The fund will help grow and scale companies worldwide, and again, will establish Toronto as a true center of global urban innovation. Now, as an investor myself, I've seen the struggles that our startups face in raising capital, and having another fund to support local homegrown success stories is absolutely critical to the success of that industry. Second, they've issued a global patent pledge. The initial patent pledge had said that they would allow Canadian resident innovators to build on top of Sidewalk intellectual property covering any software or hardware that's filed in Canada. But many appreciated that effort, but it really seemed to limit the growth of these companies worldwide. And so now that has been enhanced to give global coverage for these innovations. So our innovators will be able to operate free of fear of litigation or other assertions of patent infringement from Sidewalk or others. Third, a commitment to use local technology wherever possible. It's been declared that the majority, in fact 75% of digital systems proposed for Sidewalk's Toronto project would be purchased from third parties, meaning not created by Sidewalk Labs itself, which is again another opportunity for Canada's innovation ecosystem. Fourth, the launching of an Urban Innovation Institute for Learning and Research. The need is that Sidewalk has heard that the city should benefit from an organization that's embedded within Quayside that could support the ecosystem's ability to come together and test new ideas. And to this, they have pledged $10 million of their own funding towards the activation of an independent Urban Innovation Institute. Fifth, the publication of standards and trusted data sharing to foster innovation. This has been a critical point and a point of a lot of contention over time. Has been done leading work on smart city standards happening today in Canada, and Sidewalk has indicated publicly that they intend to support these efforts that are being led by governments, by NGOs, and by others to ensure that digital infrastructure remains with public benefits in mind and on an equal playing field. Sixth, revenue sharing with the public sector. Originally, Sidewalk proposed that the public sector receive a percentage of profits over a period of 10 years following the sale of that innovation to another city. Well, based on Waterfront Toronto's own recommendations, this has been modified to be on global net revenues, which is a boon for local startups and the public sector. So in summary, the overall opportunity for innovation in the critical area of smart city technology is an opportunity for the entrepreneurs and the residents of the City of Toronto. Moreover, it's an incredibly positive signal to those entrepreneurs who are the best and brightest in the world, who quite frankly have the choice to live almost anywhere as they focus on building their companies and their innovations as startup founders. Now, while Canada's attractive immigration policies and programs and our enormously positive country brand have made an opportunity to leverage Sidewalk's decision to select Toronto as its home for the most smartest and most innovative city in the world, and to raise our global brand even higher and attract even more of the best and brightest to come here. While certain countries are sending very mixed signals to the world, and in some cases outright negative signals to attract the best immigrants, Canada has been showing quite a considerable leadership in this regard, and this alignment of our positive country brand, our comparative advantages with visa access, the vibrancy and safety of this great city, along with world-class smart innovation, is an opportunity that will undoubtedly create jobs and prosperity and wealth for the city and for this country for years to come. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Anne and Mike.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure to be here. And believe it or not, I'm in favor of smart cities. Smart cities are the way of the future. Of that, there is no doubt. But like anything, We have to be proactive in terms of their creation and development to ensure that essential values like privacy are embedded into the operations throughout. This is what's critical. Privacy forms the foundation of our freedom. You cannot have free and democratic societies without a solid foundation of privacy. That's what we want to preserve. I'm on the International Council of Smart Cities, and all of the smart cities coming out of the East, Far East, Shanghai, Dubai, China, they're all smart cities of surveillance. They track everything. You have no freedom. You're constantly tracked and surveilled. We don't want that here. We value freedom enormously. And largely speaking, we can take it for granted because we enjoy it. That's not going to continue forever. And so we want to preserve our freedoms right now, starting with privacy. Privacy by design, which is something I developed many years ago, is all about having privacy and data utility, not the historic zero-sum model of either or, one versus the other. No, we can have multiple positive gains as long as we proactively embed much-needed privacy protective measures into the design of these smart cities. They're the way of the future, there's no question. But what we have to avoid is a surveillance model. The high-tech community in Toronto, as you were just listening to, has an amazing skill set to do this. In fact, my colleague Mike Cook, his company Identos, is remarkable, and it's an example of the amazing skill set that he and his partner companies have and are developing. We want privacy and data utility. As I've always said, we want a win-win operation. And if we do this right, we can have that model. But you see, with a smart city, the technology, the sensors, et cetera, they're going to be on 24/7. They're always going to be on tracking information, collecting data. What we don't want is the capture of personally identifiable data, which is what erodes privacy. So when the tech is on all the time, there's no opportunity for citizens to consent or revoke consent. It's just not possible. So what I had proposed and continue to propose is de-identifying data at source, meaning the minute the sensor collects the personal information of individuals or the cars driving by, the license plates, etc., you de-identify it, you scrub the personal identifiers from it, thereby having valuable data that you can use for a variety of purposes, but it won't have the privacy risk associated with it because all the personal identifiers will have been removed, gone. That way, you have a win-win operation. You have privacy, you have data utility. The sky's the limit in terms of the tech that can be applied to this. And that's what we have to be very careful of. But you see, it's easy for people to talk the talk. It's walking the talk that is difficult. I insisted on privacy by design and the de-identification of data. And while it suited their purposes, they agreed to it. When things got into a slightly different area, Sidewalk Labs wanted to create an urban data trust, which I should tell you has been completely eliminated. Waterfront Toronto said, get rid of it. It's now not part of the deal. But at the time that they envisioned the creation of the Urban Data Trust, they said, well, we're going to create this Urban Data Trust. It's not just going to be Sidewalk Labs that's going to be running this. It's going to be municipal government, provincial government, Waterfront Toronto, and the companies, the IT companies, the tech companies involved in the delivery of this technology. Great. Oh, but there's only one problem. We can't make these companies de-identify data at source. It's going to be up to them. I can assure you, if you leave this as a voluntary decision, it's not going to happen. Personal data, personally identifiable data, is a treasure trove. It's the honeypot that all companies want, because then you can do so much in terms of the information you have. Look at the Facebooks and Googles and all of the massive information they collect in a centralized manner that virtually erodes all of your privacy. That's what we can't have in this amazing city of Toronto. I want to create a smart city of privacy here, not a smart city of surveillance. And once we create that, we will have the infrastructure to sell to other countries doing this. And I say sell in a way, I mean that in a very positive way. We can create the model that others will seek to live up to. Bill Gates is talking about creating a smart city in his state of Florida in the U.S. We could pitch this to them. We could develop a first worldwide in terms of having a smart city of privacy, which would have massive benefits. Technology would abound. We would attract so many companies and grow tech even further, and we would have a solid foundation of privacy. Win-win. That has always been my objective. And we can achieve that here. But you see, the devil's always in the detail. One of the things that was being discussed in the latest thing released by Sidewalk Labs is that making the information that's collected in the public realm as a public asset, making it publicly available by default. It sounds really good, as long as there's no personal information in that public asset, whatever that may be. You have to sort all of these issues out up front, proactively addressing these issues, embedding them into the operations of what you envision so that you can have a smart city of privacy and massive data utility, enormous benefits arising from all of the intended operations that will proliferate and bring great value to our amazing city here in Toronto. So for me, it's not an either or. It has to be a win-win. You have to have privacy and data utility, privacy and smart cities, and never one versus the other. And the only way you can achieve that is by embedding privacy in upfront into your operations. Thank you very much.
Thank you to both sides for your opening statements. I want to start with the first question over to Sunil and Brian, and touching on what Anne was saying in her opening statements. Happening in the background of this whole conversation is the fact that since 2017, when the project was first announced, the public awareness of how their data is being used has sort of become a lot more significant than it was prior. Things like Cambridge Analytica, the congressional antitrust hearings, data hacks and election meddling. There's been a lot of instances that have caused the public to become aware of exactly how their data can be potentially used incorrectly. And we're now in a time where not even banks and governments can necessarily guarantee the security of personal data, as we've seen from recent breaches and hacks. Why should we trust Sidewalk Labs with that data?
And the answer to that question is the answer to Dr. Kavoukian's presentation earlier. And that is, with respect to all of this, we've heard a lot of rhetoric, some of which you rightly quoted, Jared, about how we've surrendered the city to Sidewalk Labs, and the city was held hostage to Sidewalk Labs was one comment we heard that was reported earlier in this debate by one of the strongest critics of Sidewalk Labs. The reality is we're talking about what is now and what was at the beginning a 12-acre parcel with a few public spaces in it. And the board's technology advisor, when he talked to me this morning about coming up to the debate, he's from Britain. He's only been in the country for 4 months, only in Toronto for 4 months, and he said, walk up through Yonge Dundas Square and tell me how many cameras you see on your way there, and tell me if you know who owns them. We have surveillance all around. If we kick out Sidewalk Labs, or if we keep Sidewalk Labs, if we regulate them through Waterfront Toronto or not, that's not going to change the mathematics here. If you want tough privacy regulation that applies to all of these companies, so that you've got a fair playing field for innovators, but also fair rules to protect our privacy and citizens' privacy, I know the place to fight that battle. I've been to it. It's cold, it's boring, it's called Ottawa, it's not called Quayside.
And your response?
You can walk up Yonge Street and see lots of cameras. But I think what Sidewalk Labs is aiming for, and what the public is aiming for, is something better. We can do better,
Indeed.
Right? And so I think that one of the important kind of things to add to the privacy discussion and debate is, like, how do we develop a really connected city, a growing number of connected services, a beautiful tech infrastructure that centers around me, the citizen, without having the citizen contract in place. What are my rights? What are my uses? That is actually bringing us a step forward than walking up Yonge Street today, where you don't have the ability to participate in your own privacy. I think that Sidewalk Labs has come a long way in the most recent provision as of last Friday to address some of the privacy concerns, and have conceded in quite a big way. They could have conceded sooner. Maybe they were a bit overreaching, and they might have caused some of the challenge themselves, but at the end of the day, the citizen needs to be squarely in the middle of the contract of what they're participating in and how their data is used. We live in an internet society today where even the inventor of the internet regrets, Tim regrets what he's done to us. Hundreds of companies we do business with every single day can be completely legally compliant, and whilst tertiary businesses like Cambridge Analytica, the likes, can still correlate our data back to us, right? And none of the companies that we do business with every day are breaking laws. They're PIPEDA compliant. So in the spirit of learning, the spirit of the lab itself and what they're going to invest in, I think Canada could really gain the opportunity to participate in that learning to do better as a nation and actually keep that Canadian IP and Canadianism intact. And that's part of our opportunity to export.
Thank you. And the next question is actually for Anne and Mike as well. And touching on what Sunil was discussing in his opening statement, Toronto, as we all know, at least those of us who grew up here know that it's a very insecure city finally having its moment in the spotlight. We have long fought for global recognition, and especially within our tech industry. When I grew up, this whole neighborhood was empty lots. So we're finally, the city is on the rise in a way that many couldn't have predicted. And there's a fear that if we chase this opportunity out of town, and again, companies spent cities spent unknown amounts of money trying to get Amazon HQ2 and other opportunities. This one landed right in our lap. What kind of signal will it send to the global community if we push this away? Will it not say that Toronto is now closed for business?
So I don't think it sends the wrong signal. I think Canada has set a high bar around the world for years, and we're literally just asking for transparency. And so the devil's in the details, and while we can say that 75% of the services will be delivered by third parties and companies in this room, 25% of those services are still being delivered by Sidewalk Labs. So what are we jointly contributing to their IP and then what they're going to export versus the Canadian companies in this room? So for us to kind of drive and ask for transparency is there's nothing wrong with that. We're not driving them out of the country. We're just simply trying to level the playing field. And so if we're talking about net gain or net loss here, that means you're acknowledging there's some potential for loss. And Anne highlighted privacy as one of those potentials for losses. And I've highlighted, another one, which is potential for education, for learning, for this country to actually take more away from the project than just a cool place to live, right? A place in which when you don't want to have your data collected anymore, you have to sell your house and move, right? So I think that the third part of that is really governance, right? And so there is an opportunity for us to learn about governing a new way that is protecting the values of Canadians while actually liberating both data and entrepreneurial and investment, right? These guys are controlling the investments associated. Like part of their business model is threefold: retail, services, which they don't disclose which services they'll produce versus other parties, and that really matters because some services are much richer than others. And then the third part of their business model is the capital, investing in speculative technology, which is great for as Sunil pointed out, except that now you've actually curated the tech. Is it a requirement to get an investment from Sidewalk Labs to be able to produce tech inside of Sidewalk Labs? Is it open to really everybody here or not, right? And as a Canadian company, do I have to take a foreign investor? Right? Is that really a requirement for me to participate? And I think truly in the spirit of Canadianism, we have a lot to contribute. We have many tech companies who together form a mass amount of IP that together could be exporting alongside of Sidewalk Labs. And so even with their patent improvements, there needs to be clear delineation around how we generate our own IP as well and ride that wave with them as they sell around the world.
Well, I would take a different point of view. First of all, I'm coming at the city from a very global lens with all our investment funds worldwide. And in fact, we have a Techstars in Amsterdam that's called City of 2030. It's with a partner in the municipality of Amsterdam. And I know firsthand that they're so incredibly envious of how did this happen? How did Toronto just get chosen by Alphabet and the Sidewalk corporate entity to kind of discover this place and invest so much private money in developing what was otherwise a derelict piece of waterfront real estate? And I honestly don't know the answer to why or how, but to me it really doesn't matter. The signal is what matters. It really does put Toronto on a global stage. And the debate is healthy, and I feel that the progression in the thoughts of Sidewalk and as you mentioned last Friday, there's been some big announcements of some modifications and a new improved digital charter. I think that to me it means that they're listening. They want this proposal to work. And to your last point about, as an investment fund and what conditions there are about, whether the companies have to be in Sidewalk or not. I mean, first of all, it's private money, it's not government money, so they're probably pursuing a financial return, and that's their prerogative, and it has nothing to do with me or anyone I think at this table of where and how they invest in which companies. But I did notice they've made a couple of announcements already in smart infrastructure companies, and this is before Sidewalk has even been a fait accompli, so they are seeming to want to invest in the world's best innovation. I think this represents a sandbox. It happens to be in Toronto. That happens to give home court advantage to our companies who want to demonstrate and test this, technology that most of us can't even imagine right now what it is or what it can do, and that is really built to improve the efficiencies of cities worldwide. So I see it as overall a positive for the city, which is of course the thesis of the debate today.
All right, and my next question is for Sunil and Brian. One of the reasons why the project is controversial is because we're not just talking about the ownership of buildings and office towers and lobbies. We're talking about parks, waterfront, sidewalks. Why should Toronto allow its public spaces to fall into the hands of a private company? Does that not set a dangerous precedent?
Well, first off, again, we're talking about a fairly small space that's underused up against the waterfront. And to speak to one of Mike's earlier comments, why would we let Sidewalk walk away with all of these benefits in exchange for doing urban planning on this space and construction on this space? Well, because they're paying for the privilege, and they're paying substantially. That right now both sides have agreed that Sidewalk will pay market prices, which is roughly $590 million in cash, to get access to the Quayside site, which is owned by Waterfront right now, plus whatever differential increase you see if market values rise by the time they close the deal. And you're looking in exchange for those assets. This isn't just a few homes or a few commercial spaces. On that 12 acres, you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars worth of innovative green residential construction and commercial construction that meets very high environmental standards that Waterfront wants to set, that could create a new industry in terms of tall timber construction here, where we're actually behind other places in the world despite our advantages in it. So that's a lot of benefit that you're getting. And I come to this from city politics, not the tech space. And it's not unusual if a buyer is buying public land for them to have, there's an expectation they have park space set aside, but they'll design that park space. There's an expectation that they'll be designing changes to the streetscape to allow access for this. What we're getting, as one of Toronto's most prominent and progressive urbanists, Ken Greenberg, has said over and over and over again, is an innovative experimental development when it would have been very easy for somebody, as many of the Canadian bidders wanted to come in and just write a check and put the same old condo towers on this space. Yeah. We're getting a lot of real estate benefits, affordable housing benefits, construction and innovation benefits, new kinds of civic tech innovation over and above all of the data and technology pieces we're describing. And in exchange, Sidewalk is agreeing to let Waterfront hold the data, regulate the data, and if you've got a problem with how they're doing that, we're out there lobbying for the federal government to be the regulator of that data as well, to make absolutely sure there's real enforcement. So I'm not seeing a lot of loss here.
Thank you. And your rebuttal.
What amazes me is that so much of the negative associated with Sidewalk Labs, you've referred to, there's a Block Sidewalk group and others, could have been avoided if the issues that concern citizens were addressed up front. And I'm going to use myself as an example. I was hired by Sidewalk Labs, as some of you may know, as a consultant early on, because they wanted me to embed privacy by design into the operations to make this the strongest, most privacy protected smart city we could create. I was so attracted to that, as you might imagine. And I signed up. I said, yes, I'd love to do that. Privacy by design is the highest form of privacy you can have. And I said to them, but let me just assure you, I'll be a thorn in your side if you don't follow what you're telling me you hired me for. And they said, that's what we want. We want privacy by design, done. And I did it. And I had a lot of questions put to me as well, a lot of objections, and I said, look, on the privacy front, they are going to deliver the strongest privacy imaginable. They have committed to that. That's why I'm working with them, and that's what I intend to do. Then there was this issue with Jim Balsillie, you may recall, took issue with Sidewalk Labs. Why is it going to be Sidewalk Labs who makes the determinations in terms of the governance of the data? They shouldn't be involved, should be the city, the province, whatever. And so in reaction to that, because they had a lot of criticism, they created something called an Urban Data Trust, which would have consisted of Sidewalk Labs and Waterfront Toronto, City of Toronto, Provincial, et cetera, and the IT companies, as I mentioned earlier. But this is the only thing they didn't consult with me on. As they were saying this to the board, announcing it, they said, and of course we will urge the companies to de-identify data at source to protect privacy, but we can't make them do that. And the minute they said that, I knew it was game over, because you wouldn't have any privacy left. And had they actually spoken to me about that, consulted with me, as they were supposed to do, I would have said to them, give me a week. Let me talk to Waterfront Toronto directly. Let them impose that condition on companies who want to join this group. I could have made that happen. But they didn't want to do that. They saw it as a risk. And the last thing they expected was that I would resign the following morning. So those are some of the things I'm trying to present to you, that we have to address these issues in a very broad way and always look under the hood and not just at what they're saying in terms of deliverables.
So it seems like they listened to you.
They didn't listen to me. I left, the thing fell apart, then Waterfront Toronto called me an hour later and said, come and join us, join our board, work with us, we'll make this happen.
So you've worked on both sides of the issue.
Absolutely.
I'd like
I worked
to
on
declare,
the side.
I haven't worked on either side. I'm just here to look at this from the lens of what's best for the city, what attracts the finances, the people, the brand, the jobs. And I think that we're fortunate to have it, and it's better that we're having this discussion here versus people in New York City or in Dubai or in...
But you can do both. It doesn't have to be
hang
an
on.
either or.
Let me jump in here for a second, because I'm going to ask questions to both sides that I think will give you a chance to answer or jump in with what you're trying to say. I did actually want to ask, a lot of people have argued, including Anne, that Sidewalk Labs has proven itself a less than ideal partner for the City of Toronto, just in the way that it's conducted itself. It's been entangled in shouting matches, boycotts, resignations, lawsuits. I mean, a big elephant in the room right now is the fact that they declined to participate in this event. Why should Toronto trust this organization as a partner in one of its biggest development projects, given the way that it has conducted itself?
I'm not sure that's fair. And one of the tests for how fair that is that you don't vote on a development based on the first artist drawings. That very rarely happens in this city or any other Canadian city. You don't vote on a public deal without having a robust negotiation between them. Ultimately, what the Board of Trade's position in all this was that we knew that Sidewalk was starting with a high bar, and they wanted certain things as a company coming in. And we also knew that part of what makes this discussion unique is the counterparty is Waterfront Toronto, a very unique organization that's owned by all three levels of government, which makes the politics of this hideously complicated. And Waterfront Toronto made those politics even more hideously complicated by issuing the most complex RFP I've seen in my career, which wanted environmental metrics and land use metrics and affordable housing and data privacy and all these other pieces bundled into this massive piece. Sidewalk has had a challenge because Waterfront asked them candidly, and I've said this to Waterfront Toronto, I've said this to City Council Executive, to try and asked other bidders to try and do too many things at once in a single bid. And so a lot of the conflicts that have been created is a result of them working to deal with those different pieces. We've now been at this for what, a year and a half, 2 years in terms of this piece? This will be actually one of the most transparent and longest consultation periods about a single development in Toronto's history, because there's probably another 2 or 3 years of process ahead of us. And they've been playing ball. And Waterfront, as a result of presumably the excellent advice of Dr. Kavoukian and others, the Waterfront Board, which was initially resistant to a lot of these changes, voted unanimously the other day to say they'd seen enough progress on Sidewalk agreeing on the major threshold issues which divided them, including data privacy and other data governance related issues, that they could support going forward and continuing with an evaluation and negotiations, hopefully leading to a recommendation to move forward with City Council. So if there were a lot of fights, we've made a lot of progress, and I'd rather judge based on the progress than the ancient history at the many, many months ago when this fight first started. The partnership is the partnership as it is now, not as it started to be.
And I'm going to let you respond to that directly, but I'm also going to add my own question to throw it in the mix there. Part of this is also that Toronto is fraught with a range of challenges that politicians and developers are unable to solve on their own, from affordable housing to public transit. And so if we can't depend on our government alone to solve some of these big problems, why shouldn't we actively seek out partnerships, and why shouldn't we be excited over one of the largest technology companies in the world actively taking an interest in solving these civic challenges of ours?
I would start by saying that we should get private sector partnering and actively supporting us with those challenges. And we should do so in a way that respects essentially the longevity of the investments we want to make. They go beyond an urban lab, and they go beyond just the individual companies that contribute technology to that. The truth is Sidewalk Labs did come a long ways from where they started, whether we question or not, or whether we trust them or not. They went through a public procurement process, and they were awarded, and they put the work and sweat equity in, and they got it in. And now, some of the media has essentially forced our hand to get really detailed on the items that were contentious, but there's still a level of transparency. I'll go back to one point that Brian made. They bid. It's worth it to them. Mm-hmm. And as a city, let's acknowledge we're a pretty damn good place for them to be too. This is not a crappy piece of waterfront land that was underdeveloped. There's lots of people who wanted to buy it, right? And we are looking for a win-win-win, right, as a result of this. And all I'm suggesting is that we can also set a pretty high bar through this. This can be a let's do better story. And Sidewalk would come, they would do themselves a lot of favors by trying to do that transparently as well. And so nobody wants to see Sidewalk leave, but we know they made a business decision to invest here. We're an attractive place. As you said, we're full of tech talent. We're the hottest place going, right? This is really critical. Everyone's winning right now. So how do we get together and solve some of these more difficult challenges, that are really putting longevity in the Canadian economy, right? Because there's right now is an imbalance on who could extract value out of this. It's not just a revenue play for Toronto, right? Like you said, it is affordable housing. We're getting some benefits out, but the tech economy across the nation should be able to benefit from this too. We should be able to keep Canadian investors also benefiting from this, keeping Canadians invested here in Canada, jobs in Canada, growing wealth in Canadians' pockets, not just foreign investors, right? And so there's a balance to be had, and I think that we can keep this dialogue going as a result of the steps they've already demonstrated they'll go. It warrants that, hey, we can trust and we can build a bridge, and I think we can put more on the table as a city.
Sure. Well, I think to your point, my phone just lit up about 3 minutes ago that from the Logix reporting that Plaza Ventures is now co-investing with Sidewalk Labs on a new venture fund. So what does that mean? That means that one of the largest condo developer, one of the most profitable private companies in the city, is putting its own capital alongside Sidewalk to be part of that fund. Yep. So that is what's happening. It's catalyzing private investment, which is what I think we really want to see more of in Canada, is more private initiative, private sector dollars at the most risky stage of investing, early stage innovative startups, which have an incredibly high propensity for complete abject failure. Yep. So we want to see this, and it's really being catalyzed by this organization and by what's happening on the waterfront.
And that deal flow is everything to an investor, right? Mm-hmm. So what are they getting out of this equation? They're getting some pretty amazing deal flow opportunity, right?
I also just want to interject.
They got a lot of carrots.
I want to interject and say that this isn't just an unused piece of land. The taxpayer spent over $1.25 billion making this a usable piece of land, and it could have been used for a wide range of benefits. Does it not require us to stop and second guess why this particular tech company wants to come in and take advantage of this land? Are we not underplaying our hand given all the advantages that we've discussed in this negotiation table?
First off, I'm not sure that's a fair calculation in that the billion odd dollars that are being spent by all three levels of government on Don River flood remediation are being spent to help with flood remediation for a wide area. And so you often get the staging of these conversations around Sidewalk as though, the federal government did all this work just to make it easy for Sidewalk on one of the tiniest parcels in the Portlands. to suddenly make an investment there. The way we traditionally decide if the land isn't going to go to the public sector for waterfront space, of which there's lots of space left on the waterfront, public and private, to be used for other purposes. The way we decide, as responsible governments, having served in a couple of them, to let the private sector invest, is we have a competitive RFP. And there were, if I remember correctly, 8 different bidders for this space. Waterfront, again, made the bid complicated by saying you need to be saying yes to a lot of metrics on innovation, to have a lot of green construction built into your piece, to have smart cities features built into your piece, to at least be talking about transit connectivity and so on, all down the list for those of you who've read the RFP, and I encourage you to do it because it's the root of a lot of the problems with this debate. And guess who won that competitive bid? And there was a criticism by the auditor that suggested that Sidewalk somehow had an inside track on that. If you look at the RFP, the auditor's test for how that got an inside track was they collected more information in correspondence with Waterfront Toronto. The RFP itself specifies how every bidder could correspond with Waterfront Toronto to ask questions about what was happening there, and Sidewalk asked more questions, and so the auditor used that to hit them for somehow having a competitive advantage in the bid. They're willing to pay money. They're already spending millions of dollars on the consultation process of this. If we want to do, a rebid, we're putting ourselves at risk, which is why I made those comments to Parliament Hill. We've already gone through the process. We're an agency that is already widely respected for its public realm improvements, for its commitment to design on the waterfront, for its commitment to innovative construction and green construction. Said, who's the best to do this? And the answer came up with Sidewalk. And for those of you who are worried that, well, Sidewalk's never actually developed a property before, Sidewalk caved again on that too in the negotiations and said they're willing to let Waterfront Toronto, not Sidewalk Labs, but Waterfront Toronto is going to hold an RFP to determine who's actually going to build Sidewalk Labs green designs. And the government partner here is going to be determining who actually builds that, even though they're going to get feedback, obviously, from Sidewalk Labs as the designer. Again, pretty good deal for us, even if it is a really good deal for them.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you guys get one last word in if you'd like before we begin the closing statements, just to respond to that in particular.
It's not even that I would object to any of the things you're saying. I'm not. I just want a strong commitment from Sidewalk that they will do what they have promised to do in terms of what Waterfront Toronto is compelling them to do in terms of de-identification of data at source, using privacy by design, ensuring the privacy of citizens is protected above all else. If they do that and the things you're referring to, I don't have an objection to it. I want a very strong commitment to privacy so that we can build a smart city of privacy, not a smart city of surveillance. And that's been the norm everywhere else. So we are seeking to change that.
Thank you very much. And thank you both for your opinions on this matter. We're going to start with the closing statements, after which we will take another poll and compare the results of the 2 polls to see who was able to change the most minds today. So first, closing statement, Anne and Mike, I'll leave that to you.
Okay. The natural question to ask yourself is, if you're talking about a debate around net gain, you have to acknowledge there's possibility for net losses. We've talked about investment that's already been made. We've been circling. There's a lot of discussion that's taken place over the course of a year. This is all sunk cost, right? The idea of getting privacy wrong and consent wrong has potentially catastrophic impacts, not just for the project, but for any acceleration of smart city initiatives across the nation. You get this wrong and you're going to slow down growth, you're going to slow down investment. So it's really important that you're putting that front and center, and that it's actually part of the learning process. This is a commitment by the lab to start an opportunity for us to learn together, make some really transparent commitments around doing better. We're dependent on an internet today. You put a bunch of services and a bunch of people in a close location and you get dependent on the same vulnerabilities we have without thinking through privacy, and you're just multiplying the problem for them. The other challenge is really governance, right? And so at the end of the day, we're talking about some net benefits to society, and they're broad, some tech company benefits and some investment benefits. Let's just be really transparent around how we're driving the economy of Canadian wealth, right? And not just, we have to be really careful. It's a slippery slope. You have to have transparency to understand whether you're funneling IP out of the country into foreign-owned companies or you're actually creating wealth here in Canada, the next BlackBerry, the next Nortel, right? And so there's some fundamental thinking there that I think we as a society in Canada should use this as a really good model for making sure that these are mutually beneficial and balanced in that regard. The other idea is really open access. Like, it's really critical. They've gone a long ways to demonstrate some of the open standards and open access, but there's not a lot of transparency around what services are up for grabs, what's available for third parties to do, and what is the process for being picked or not being picked, right? They're really in a situation to pick the winners in this one, and so as part of the governance process, I think it's really important that, you know, they're obviously here to get the talent from the room. You know, this city is plush with talent and innovative startups. We're investable. That's the truth, right? So how do we bring some balance to make sure that, you know, there is a very clear and a fair way to make sure that we're getting our share also as Canadian companies who are invested and or already grounded here, aren't looking for investment, aren't looking necessarily to get purchased. So that's a balanced approach, good governance, a strong agenda around education, pushing, let's do better as a city and show the nation how we can do that. And of course, making sure that there's a commitment to the end user, the citizen here. They need to have rights. They need to know when they buy or when they inhabit this area that they can walk away. When they build a relationship between their digital life and their physical life, we should have the right to separate those. And that has to be clear, has to be part of the governing kind of agenda.
Thank you very much, Mike. Your closing statement.
Thanks, and thank you everybody for listening, and thanks to our opponents. I've only met Mike this afternoon, but I've long been an admirer of Dr. Kavoukian's work, and her points are important, and I'll get to them in a second. There's really two issues we've talked about here in different ways. The first issue is what's the benefit? And you've heard from us pretty clearly that the benefit is there, it's visible, it's part of the new realignment, as they're calling the agreement between Waterfront and Sidewalk, in dollars and cents. It's almost $600 million in cash being paid by Sidewalk to pay the market price to buy this land off of the public, and we can use that money for our own purposes. It's hundreds of millions of dollars worth of green environmental development that can set a new standard and help to create a new tall timber construction industry in this region that's providing homes, many of them affordable, on a site that, like it or not, is still empty at this point and has been for decades. We've seen through Sunil's remarks the benefits in terms of the Urban Institute to draw together prop tech, mobility as a service, all of these civic technology, smart city firms and institutions together to learn from each other off of this site. The venture fund, the commitment to procurement, the commitment to procure the development site so that a Canadian developer can now be building and developing these green buildings and apartments otherwise. Those benefits are all now clear. And they've been the result of negotiations that critics, not these two, but others, critics of Sidewalk, tried to derail because they claimed that we couldn't negotiate with a big tech player, that it was automatically imbalanced. And Waterfront has proven that wrong, and Sidewalk has gone along with the pushback on many of those points in order to land here in Toronto in our tech market. So why wouldn't we say yes to that? Well, the one answer we've heard is Dr. Kavoukian's concern of, well, can we trust these guys to do what we want them to do on privacy? And I have to tell you, again, the Board of Trade's approach to this, we started in this debate, not by standing up and saying we wanted the Waterfront negotiations to continue with Sidewalk, although we said that second. The first thing we said is the answer to that question is to use the old Cold War phrase, trust but verify. The problems that Dr. Kavoukian are talking about are problems that are being resolved in Barcelona, in Estonia, in the European Union through government regulation. Not perfect. Sometimes it's too hard for innovators. Sometimes it's not protecting citizens' privacy enough. But that's the reality of regulation. So if you want a solution that keeps Sidewalk here, help us lobby Ottawa for tougher privacy legislation and tougher privacy enforcement instead of putting all your guns on Sidewalk Labs, which once again, if we push them out tomorrow because of concerns about privacy, there are 20 other companies that are already doing or talking about doing the same thing to a smaller scale around this city, around this region, around this country that are able to do that because we don't have those regulations in place. Set a level playing field so Sidewalk and everybody else can comply and be expected to comply. And then we'll get the benefits
Hear, hear.
and the assurance that comes with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For a second time, I'd like to direct everyone to slido.com. If you can take out your phones, put in the code TMLS2019. Just as a reminder, the initial poll had a 74% in agreement with the motion that Sidewalk Labs is a net gain for the city and 26% against. In a few moments, we will, once I let everyone take a chance to vote, we will compare the final results to determine the ultimate winner based on who was able to change the most minds. One. All right, we're going to call it there. And the closing vote is changing on me too fast to write down. No, I believe in the end we have, let's say 56% agrees and 44% disagrees. And in the end, that is a greater change for the con side. More people have switched to your side over the course of the hour.
Sorry.
No problem at all. You're allowed to show some emotion. Thank you both sides very much for participating. Thank you all for participating in this. And I know it's an engaging debate that's going to continue on for years to come, but it's important that we all participate in this conversation because it does affect us in a very profound way. So thank you all for being part of that.